Welcome back to the channel. I hope you are all doing good. Have you ever had a story that leaves you wondering how something like that could happen in a modern hospital? Today's video is based on the personal account of a Black American woman who says that one of the most important days of her life nearly turned into a tragedy. And according to her, she and her unborn almost lost their lives during labor because she believes the white nurse responsible for her care treated her differently due to racial bias. So let's get into this clip. I'll be back with more commentaries, and in case of any thoughts, kindly feel free to let me know in the comment section. Otherwise, just stay tuned.
Story time about the time that me and my son both almost died because my labor and delivery nurse was a racist. So actually, let me back up to the day before I had my son. I was having really bad back pains, and this is my first child. I didn't know what anything was supposed to feel like, so I went to the hospital to see if that was normal and just to make sure everything was going okay with the baby. They told me that I was having back contractions and that I was forced and meters dilated, but that they were going to send me home because more than likely it would be a long time before I delivered, and I could essentially just wait until I progressed, but they told me to come back if anything changed. So I went home, and pretty much that whole rest of the day and night, nothing happened. And the next morning, I was just in a lot of pain, still having back contractions, but nothing major had changed. So I decided I was going to spend the whole day essentially walking, trying to make myself go into labor naturally. And again, nothing happened other than my pain in my back intensified. And then I had gotten ready for bed. I think at this point it was around 11 o'clock, and I got up to use the restroom and my water broke. So me and my husband got everything ready. We rushed to the hospital and went inside. And when we went in, I think there was a nurse that I was dealing with, and I know for sure there was one other. I think there may have been two, but it wasn't very busy. I only saw like a couple of people there. And then I am certain that I was the only person there because the other nurse, the one that wasn't admitting me, she made a comment about how it was weirdly quiet and I was the only person there to deliver. And then a little bit after I came in, one other woman came in. And I say that only because, just so you know, it's not like they were understaffed or that they just didn't have the capacity to see me. It was very intentional. Anyway, so the nurse that was admitting me asked me when my due date was. I told her that ironically it was that day, and she rolled her eyes at me and told me that she tells first-time moms all the time that it's very unlikely that you are delivering on your due date and that we should expect to go beyond that if this is our first child, and so that she thinks it's very unlikely that my water broke. I told her that I'm pretty sure I would know the difference, and reluctantly she agreed to test me. Then she told me that it was obviously in fact amniotic fluid, and then she admitted me. And when you're admitted to the hospital, they put monitors on your stomach to monitor the baby's heart rate as well as your contractions. But she was acting like she just didn't want to touch me, like I had leprosy or something, and so she was very lightly setting it on me, and she didn't tighten it to the point where it wasn't even reading anything. And so there's just straight lines on the monitor, and I was concerned because I didn't realize that she had put it on wrong. I just thought that she couldn't get a heart on the baby. And so I inquired about it, and she told me no, that it was going to be a long time until I was actually laboring so that she would come back and fix it. And then at this point, I think I had called my mom and my sister, and my mom and my sister came. They lived much closer to the hospital than I did, and they got there relatively quickly, and so we were all kind of hanging out in the room just waiting. I was still having back contractions, but nothing major was happening. I told them that she said it was going to be a while, so my mom and my sister went home, and me and my husband stayed. And I think at this point, it was maybe like 12:45-ish, and I had to get up and use the restroom again. And so I asked the nurse on the little speaker thing where you can communicate with them, I asked if it was okay if I used the restroom and if it would matter with the monitor. She told me it wasn't hooked up properly anyway, so that it didn't matter, that I could use the restroom. And when I went to the restroom, I noticed that I was bleeding pretty heavily, so again, over the speaker, I asked her if she could come check because there was a lot of blood and I was concerned. And she just said, "You're actively in labor, of course there's going to be bleeding." So I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know if that was normal or not, so I just got back in bed and I waited. But I was in a lot of pain at this point, and I told her that that I was experiencing a lot of pain. I did say I didn't want an epidural and that I was going to try to have the baby naturally. And she asked me what my pain level was, and mind you, she has not been back in the room once at this point. This is all communicating over the little speaker thing. So she said, I told her that my pain level was at a 5. She told me if it was really at a 5 that I wouldn't be able to have a conversation with her, a full conversation with her, and that she was going to put my chart at a 2. Anyway, the rest of the night, essentially nothing happened except for me being in a lot of pain and then her just not coming into the room. She didn't come back in from the time that she put the monitors on to the time that I delivered. She did not come back in once. And at the point that somebody else came back in, it was 7:40 in the morning, and it was a new nurse, and she was coming to erase the other nurse's name and tell me that she was taking over. And at that point, that's when she noticed that the monitor was not on me correctly, and she put it on, or she attempted to put it on and tighten it, and so she pulled back my blanket that I had over me, and then that's when she realized that I was in a pool of blood, and she kind of panicked, and then she told me to get on all fours and so she could check me, and then she called a bunch of nurses in and my doctor, and then at that point I started getting really lightheaded and things were like just dizzy for me. Everything was fuzzy for me. And then she told me that my placenta had ruptured and that they couldn't get a heartbeat on the baby, and that I was going to have to go into have an emergency C-section, and they rushed me in the elevator to the OR room. And then that's the last thing I remember, because I believe I lost 4 pints of blood and I passed out from the blood loss. And then the next time I woke up, it was hours later, and I woke up because someone on the administrative level of the hospital was in the room with my mom, and I woke up to this woman talking to my mom, telling her she didn't know if me or my son was going to make it, and that it was very touch and go, and that they wouldn't know anything for the next 24 hours, and then I passed out again. And then the second time that I woke up, that time my brother was in the room with me, and as well as my mom, and they were just waiting, and I asked where my son was, and they told me that he was in the NICU, and they were trying to get an IV in him. They needed to administer an IV, and that I wasn't able to see him because they were concerned, because of my blood loss, that I was going to go into shock, and that they were still treating him, and then I passed out again. The only other thing that I really remember about that day is a bunch of people going in and out of my room to check on me, and then a bunch of people going in and out of the NICU to check on my son. And the nurse that had come in the morning, she did bring me pictures, because it was a full 24 hours before I was able to actually meet and hold my son, so she would go take pictures of him for me. But because the initial nurse, there was such a long period of time between me being admitted and her, the new nurse coming in to check on me, they didn't know at what point my placenta had ruptured and how long my son had been without oxygen, so they were worried about brain damage, and they had to do a bunch of tests, and he was also not in a stable condition because he himself had lost a lot of blood. And then again, they were worried about me going into shock because of the amount of blood that I lost. And then by the grace of God, the next day, me and my son were both stable, and he was able to come into my room with me. And it seems like every single person who worked at the hospital on the higher level, obviously that's an exaggeration, but a ton of people came into my room essentially apologizing that there was such a lapse in care, and they were saying that it wasn't characteristic, that wasn't their policy, and that basically that they would be addressing the issue. And it realistically just seemed like they were trying to avoid being sued, is what it came down to. But I bring all of this up because I saw that video of that woman who was screaming out in pain and minutes away from delivering her baby being ignored, and it's just another example of why the maternal mortality rate for Black women is so high comparatively to other races, and it just really comes down to racism, and there's really no explanation for it.
We have heard it all, and if I can say that in case her account on this issue is real, it is a deeply disturbing reminder that every patient deserves to be treated with dignity. Every patient deserves to be treated with compassion and equal care, regardless of race. So let's talk about what she says happened, why stories like this resonate with so many people, and what broader conversations they raise about healthcare. This woman is explaining that she went into labor expecting what every mother hopes for, a safe delivery and a healthy baby. Instead, she says she repeatedly asked for help as her pain became more severe. And according to her, her concerns were dismissed and her requests for attention were ignored. So she describes this feeling frightened as a condition wasn't, believing that something was seriously wrong. She's saying that this nurse responsible for her care did not respond with the urgency she expected. Eventually, medical staff intervened, and she believes that if help had come any later, both she and her son might not have survived. So listening to a story like this is heartbreaking because childbirth is already one of the most vulnerable moments in a person's life. Every expectant mother should feel heard, should be respected and cared and should be cared for throughout the process. So her story also connects with a larger conversation that has existed for years. We have many researchers and healthcare organizations have documented disparities in maternal health outcomes, particularly for Black women. And that does not mean that every difficult experience is caused by racism, but many patients have shared stories of feeling unheard, of having their symptoms minimized. And one important lesson from stories like this is the importance of listening to patients. Healthcare professionals will often work under enormous pressure, but every patient deserves careful attention and respect. And when someone says they are in distress, those concerns should be taken seriously. The goal should not be to assume the worst about every nurse or doctor. Most healthcare workers dedicate their lives to helping others. And at the same time, if there are cases where bias influences treatment, those situations deserve investigation and accountability. And what stands out most in this woman's account is the emotional impact. She says she entered the hospital excited to meet her child, but instead feared she might never live alive. That is a traumatic experience that no family should have to endure. And stories like hers often spark strong reactions because they raise important questions. Are hospitals really doing enough to ensure equal treatment? Are medical professionals receiving adequate training to recognize unconscious bias? And are patients encouraged to speak up when they believe that something is not right? And these are conversations worth having because improving healthcare benefits everyone, regardless of race or background. And every patient deserves to be treated as an individual with empathy and professionalism. Trust between patients and healthcare providers is built through communication, through respect and accountability. Yes. So whether you agree with every conclusion drawn from the woman's experience or not, her story reminds us that listening to patients matters. If someone feels ignored during a medical emergency, that concern should never be dismissed lightly. So what do you think? Have you or someone ever felt that your medical concerns weren't taken seriously? What changes do you think hospitals could make to improve patient care for everyone? Just share your thoughts respectfully in the comments. And if you found this discussion thought-provoking, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss future commentaries. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Of course, all credit belongs to the original creators of the video.